Hi, this is Brandy Shantz, and you're listening to Living Chronic. Today, I am speaking with Emma Polette from emmapolette.com. She does a daily yoga. She also is a chronic illness warrior living with both Graves' disease and endometriosis. So, welcome and thank you for coming on Living Chronic, Emma.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So, we talked a little bit before about, what it's like living, with a chronic illness. And like many of us, you have two chronic illnesses. So life's a little bit different for us when you have more than one because they interact with each other sometimes. You have to think about one or the other when you are getting treated. So tell me a little bit about what it's like living with both endometriosis and Graves' disease.
Yeah, so endometriosis is the one that I've had for the longest amount of time, and I guess it's the one that I feel more comfortable talking about because I understand it a little bit better, even though no one really understands it. But for people who are listening who don't know what it is, it's a chronic disease that faces people with uteruses, and it's where we get cells that are similar to the lining of the uterus grow in other parts of the body. And so it causes inflammation and pain, and it also causes a lot of fatigue. And it can affect not just the pelvic area, but people, like I remember speaking to a doctor about it and him saying, I don't know why it's not treated the same as something like cancer, because people will get endometriosis growths even in their brains, like it can grow anywhere. So for me, that's been a huge issue in my life because of the amount of pain that it's caused me. And the amount of, the fatigue is kind of an interesting one as well. So that's the endometriosis. And then when I thought the endometriosis was over with, then I started to get, it was actually in March 2020 when the pandemic was starting. I was going, I was getting a lot of stress. There was just multiple things going on besides the pandemic. Like if the pandemic hadn't happened, this would have been a stressful time anyway. So you add that on top. And I started getting lots of actually in the 6 months leading up to that, I'd been really, really anxious. And then around March 2020, I started to get a lot of heart palpitations and weirdness with my heart, and ended up going to emergency. And the second time I went to emergency, they figured out that I had Graves' disease. And that was really interesting because the endometriosis really, for me, was a fatigue thing. Like the pain really made me very fatigued and slow and unable to have a lot of energy and not be able to get on with my life. The Graves was almost the opposite. It wasn't a pleasant kind of energy, but it really revved me up, and I was constantly like revved, and I was constantly not sleeping well, and I was constantly worried about everything, and I was constantly overwhelmed. So it was a totally opposite feeling. And until I was diagnosed, I didn't really have any, even when I was diagnosed, it wasn't a pain thing. So it was very different to the endometriosis. So then last year, 2022, the endometriosis started to come back because I had an early menopause due to some surgery for the endometriosis, and because I have Graves' disease, and also because I have a history of heavy drinking, which I think was partly to do with self-medicating with so much pain. They were really worried about my bone health. So I was put on HRT, and then the HRT, which is obviously estrogen, endometriosis, they think is estrogen driven. So when I was put on the HRT for my Graves, that has brought back the endometriosis. And so it's just really interesting to sort of see how they do interact, but they're also at such opposite spectrums to each other. Like one really slows me down and the other one makes me this kind of hyper manic sort of person. Yeah. So they're really different to each other, and it's weird to be in those two places at the same time sometimes, to be in pain and tired but a little bit kind of wired at the same time. It's not pleasant.
I can imagine. I deal with the fatigue a lot, which is debilitating, but I couldn't imagine having to deal with both of those kinds of things at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, I really love how you're doing yoga to help address some of your issues. I'm so big on taking care of yourself and total wellness as best as you can and getting out there and moving.
Yeah.
Um, One of the reasons you do yoga is to try to reduce stress. And we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it's so ridiculous in so many ways because every chronic illness sufferer hears the same thing. Stress is going to make this worse. Well, how do I get rid of stress, doc, when I can't go to work, when I can't get out of bed, when I can't get an appointment with the doctor because pandemic and we have a doctor shortage and I have to wait 6 months? There's so many things that we live with every day
Yeah.
that contribute to stress. So finding something to help reduce that stress is so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But yoga is a wonderful way to do that. So tell
Mm.
me a little bit about your daily yoga.
Yeah. So in March this year, it seems like lots of things happen in March in my life. It's like March and October for some reason. God knows what will happen in October this year. But so in March, I was so over being in pain. Like I was just always in pain, it felt like. And I just wanted something else to focus on because I felt like all I was thinking about was the pain I was in. When was I going to get a doctor's appointment? You know, how was I going to get all the stuff done in my life that I want to get done? I'm quite sort of driven. I want to be doing things and I couldn't be doing things. So I've been practicing yoga for about 25 years and I've been a teacher since 2014. And so I thought, actually I started studying for a short course in what's called accessible yoga. And it's a beautiful movement of teaching people to understand that yoga really is for everyone. And unfortunately, in the Western world, in the kind of diet culture world we live in, it's become this real thing about getting a yoga body and to look a certain way and, you know, make sure you're wearing the right brand gear and that you're thin and that you're bendy and all that sort of stuff. But that's not what yoga actually is all about, and it never was, but it's kind of been co-opted like that. So when I was studying accessible yoga, it's really about how, you know, you can do yoga in a chair, you can do yoga lying down in your bed, you can do yoga by not even doing yoga, you can just be meditating, or you could be even studying some of the sort of the ethics around yoga as opposed to physically practicing yoga. There's so many ways to do yoga. And so I got really inspired by that because I thought most of my study in yoga has been about the physical practice. And I thought it's a really good time to go into more of the philosophy behind yoga and more into the meditation practices. And so I do a physical practice maybe 3 or 4 times a week, but I also do a lot of study and reflection and meditation. And, you know, one of the most beautiful things that is part of yoga is a word called Ahimsa, which is a Sanskrit word that means non-harming. And it's basically about showing up in the world and trying not to harm others or yourself or the planet or animals or anything. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah. And so in that moment in March when I was so down and so in so much pain all the time, that word ahimsa meant so much to me because I thought all I can do is try not to add more harm. You know, like I'm already experiencing enough as it is. So why not try and live a life where I'm trying to add less of, you know, take harm away as much as I possibly can. And that became like a real, I guess, a light in this dark tunnel that I was in. So having that practice every day has made a huge difference, I think, over the last couple of months since I've been practicing every day.
I really thank you for sharing that. I've never heard that.
Ahimsa, Ahimsa. So there's,
Ahimsa.
yeah, if you don't mind me saying, there's 8 parts to yoga, and I think everyone's really focused on the physical practice and meditation. But there's also there's the philosophy behind yoga. So there's the ethical practices of how we show up in the world, and Ahimsa is one of those. And then there's personal practices that we do to look after ourselves. And then there's also breathing practices and concentration and a whole host. There's 8 different things. And so it's really nice to focus on something like Ahimsa. And I mean, I can see you just like thinking about that word and how that can be such a transformation just from one little word and one little kind of philosophy can make a big difference.
Absolutely. I talk about this so frequently. Um, it's very difficult to not do further harm to yourself sometimes. We get down on ourselves.
Yeah.
You're having a flare, you're having difficulty achieving the things you normally would every day in life. You've been put on prednisone for the thousandth time and you've blown up like a balloon. So why not just have, whatever to eat because it doesn't matter. And it's very easy to start going down this path of, well, it doesn't matter anyways. I can't do this. I can't do this. So why not just do whatever or not even get up at all?
Yeah.
I love this concept of don't do any more harm.
Yeah.
And
And
I
and
think that's a really great one to wrap your head around when you're a chronically ill person.
yeah, that's right. And like another example is, say you do eat a bowl of ice cream because that feels really good to you in that moment. Don't then beat yourself up for that, because that's adding extra harm on top. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Great advice. Yes.
just be really caring and accepting of yourself, because us with our chronic illnesses, we need as much care as we possibly can get. And so if we're not showing ourselves care, how can we expect that other people are going to be showing us care as well? So we sort of got to lead the way, I think, in some respects.
That's just so great. I could probably reflect on this for the rest of the day and do more shows. Um, we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We're so hard on ourselves. Every little thing. And I think that's just most, especially women, right?
Yeah.
We're always hard on ourselves. But that's such a great concept. What a great technique and what a great word to help you get through life with a chronic illness. I really love that part of this.
Oh, great.
So, do you introduce that a lot in your daily yoga?
Yeah. So I've started, as I said, like with my own learning of yoga, I was taught in a very Western way to start with. And so it was all very much about the physical practice and can you do a back bend, or which I can't, by the way, but like, how
Right.
extreme can you be with your yoga? And since doing this accessible yoga course and some other study that I've started doing, like I've really gotten more interested in the philosophy, and I've started teaching that more in the classes that I do face to face. But actually, this month was the first time I've ever run one where I did a 30-day. I'm in the middle of a 30-day challenge with a group of 10 women, so we're doing it online. And so it's a 30-day yoga challenge, and then every day there's a little something to do. And so it's not a physical practice every day, and some days we do some of the philosophy. And some of these women, like they've said to me, learning about the philosophy of yoga has been the game changer for them, not the physical practice, not the meditation, but just learning about ahimsa, non-harm. Another one we talked about this week is brahmacharya, which is about energy conservation. And so traditionally, well, they've talked a lot about that being celibacy, which is, one way of saving your energy. But a lot of people don't want to do that. So it's more about, in general, what is your way of saving energy. And that can be by like not sort of buying into hustle culture, but it can also be like by not, not having to argue with everyone all the time. That takes up energy, just accepting other people's opinions or whatever. So there's lots of different little tiny lessons that you can learn through yoga that can just really make a change in the way you show up. And I think especially for people with chronic illnesses. And so, yeah, I'm really enjoying these 30-day. I've done one 30-day challenge, but I hope to do more, because I think when people can start to bring these practices into their daily lives, it can make a really huge difference.
I believe it. I hope you do many more of these because I think many of us with chronic illness would like to learn more. This is very difficult, having a chronic illness really affects your life. And I've learned over the years that addressing the emotional and the mental effects of chronic illness is actually more difficult than the physical most of the time.
Yeah.
Not that the physical is not difficult. We're all trying to deal with pain or, inability to move like we normally would. But certainly that emotional and mental toll that it takes on you is so just tremendous.
Yeah.
So having techniques to learn how to deal with it, I think is, probably the most important thing you can do.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think when we live in this world where we're kind of valued by how much we can do or how much we can produce or how much we contribute, and that's what's valued. So when you have a chronic disease and you can't do everything that you even want to do, like you might have a million plans in your head, but you can't do them, it can be an easy thing to not feel valued by other people, not feel valuable to yourself. So what I love about these philosophies is it's an antidote to that. It's like another way of thinking about life. We don't have to be productive to be valuable. Like we were born, so we're innately valuable. The people or our pets. I know you're a fur mum too. Like
yes.
we are valuable to them, even if we're not productive. Like just being around people that you love and they love you, that's valuable and that's productive, without having to tick lots of boxes and produce lots of stuff.
That's a real aha moment. It really is. I wrote a blog just a couple of weeks ago where I talked about just that, about how it's so difficult to learn how to accept who I am as a person now that I'm sick. Because, you know, the me before I was sick, I was super duper American, right? Or even just Western, you're from Australia.
Yeah.
We have, there's obviously some very similar veins. I woke
Yeah.
up at 4 a.m. and I did my big run or my bike because I was training for an Ironman. Then I would read my book, and then I would be at work no later than 7 or 7:30 and work till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. Fit in a second workout, have a side something happening. And when I suddenly could only do one thing at a time, if anything at all, it felt like I was suddenly worthless as a person.
Yeah.
So this whole concept, I think, is a real aha moment for everybody, because I think we all go through these very similar things.
Yeah.
So it's very, I love what you're doing with that. So you also experienced early menopause as a
Mm-hmm.
result of the endometriosis. And I
Yeah.
know for women, you know, menopause in and of itself signifies a bit of an end of your youth, but also when you go through it early, it means that you might miss out on certain aspects of your life, like having children. How has that affected your life, and what are you doing to kind of deal with that on a daily basis?
Yeah. So, yeah, I was 43, so that's still quite young, but not, I mean, you can say anyone's had it worse than you, can't you? So I'm not going to say that. But so 43 is very young. And I wasn't expecting the menopause symptoms, but I had a lot of hot flushes and not sleeping. But it turns out that was probably actually the Graves' disease and not the menopause, but it was hard to tell. But what really did happen for me was that I put on probably about 30 kilos, which I think's, I'm not sure what that is in pounds, but anyway, it's a lot. It's it was about half my body weight again. Over a few years, it didn't come on straight away, but I am I'm a trained personal trainer and I was a health coach. And so everyone had always looked at me as the sort of healthy one. And then all of a sudden I'd put on a lot of weight and my body shape was different. And it was, all the joints are sore and stuff, and not from any of the chronic illnesses I have, but more just because it's an aging body kind of thing. I remember seeing a physio when I was 47 and he goes, "Oh, you've got a 52-year-old's body." And I'm like, that's helpful. I don't know why you have to tell me that, but anyway. Yeah. So it was really interesting because, I thought it was menopause, but I think it was actually the Graves' disease now, a lot of the symptoms I was getting. But it has impacted my life because I never had children, and I think I said to you before, like it was never a burning desire to have them. So I don't feel like I've missed out in a really devastating, traumatic kind of way. But it's also affected my sort of ability to have relationships and things. Like endometriosis can make sex really painful. And then during my sort of mid-30s when I was diagnosed, that's kind of when you're out, well, if you haven't already got a partner, that's when you're out trying to meet people and stuff. But I wasn't feeling up to it. I wasn't feeling well enough. I wasn't feeling sexy or like I wanted to be in a relationship. And so now that I'm, I turned 50 in 2 or 3 months, and it's kind of like my life is different to everyone else's. I don't have a partner, that impacts, I guess, my finances. I don't own a home because it's harder to own a home on your own. Like, the ongoing effects of those things kind of all start to add up. And I sort of start to realize now, turning 50, I think, is a big turning point. It's kind of like, wow, I'm not young anymore. And, where will I be in 20 years' time? And what will my life look like then? And I'm not trying to worry about that too much, but it is something that has started to play on my mind. So I think when I think about that, sometimes I feel like I'm really behind everyone because I never had kids and I don't have a partner and I don't own my own home. And I used to beat myself up about that. I used to think that there was something wrong with me. But now I sort of think, this is all related to having had chronic illnesses for most of my adult life. And it's not me as a person. It's not personal. It's not because I did something wrong. It's just because of the way my life has turned out. So again, I think the yoga helps with that. It helps me just not to blame myself for things and just be kind of accepting of what's happened. I can't change it. There's no point in making myself feel worse about it. But I think it has impacted me, more than I would have said 5 years ago, now that I've thought it all through.
Yes, it's interesting. I'm also in a similar situation mentally, just reflecting on everything I've lost out on over the past, gosh, how long has it been now? 10 years since I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it does make you take stock of your life. And I think you do have to work through those feelings and thoughts that you have of, did I lose anything? How do I not blame myself? These are very real things that we all go through. And I think we all hit them at different points. I sort of kept pushing through my own health issues. Like, it's not there. Keep going. And then suddenly it was like, oh, well, time to reflect on this because it's very real.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought it was also very interesting. You mentioned weight. That's something that I've struggled with as well. I, like you, am very healthy, very physical. I'm known as the one who's always out running, doing the Ironman competitions, always up to something. And for me, it's when I'm on the prednisone. It just, I did look it up. 20 kilos was about 60 pounds.
Yeah.
So I have done 30 to 40 pounds on the prednisone, and people judge me. And sometimes they just flat out have the nerve to say it to my face, well, I thought you were very active. Well, I am, or was. Right now I can't move because of my disease and I'm on prednisone. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
So it is very difficult to not internalize that and feel bad about yourself. I actually have been so excited to see, I don't know if you're familiar with Christina Applegate, the actress, and she was recently diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I felt very seen when she just walked out onto that camera, to continue filming her season of her show. And she had put on weight. And, I know that she's dealing with the same things that you deal with and I deal with. People judging her, have something to say about why did you gain the weight? What are you doing? So I think that's something we all deal with, and you try not to internalize that.
Yeah. I feel like I was really lucky because, in a way, when I was in hospital after I had the hysterectomy, back in 2017, I feel like I had this kind of like divine message. I was also on morphine at the time, so it might have been that. But I felt like I felt like I was told, Emma, you've punished your body for long enough. Now it's time to love it. So up until that point, I was really focused on how much I weighed, what my body looked like, how big my tummy was. And it's funny because like right now I'm rubbing my tummy because it's very swollen because my endo's a bit bad today. So it's, it's quite big. But I was really lucky to get that message because I have really spent the last 5 years loving my body. And when I say that, it's not like I wake up every day and go, God, you look hot, Emma. You're so beautiful. It's not always that. Some days I don't think I look beautiful, but some days I do. But I've realized that I'm more than just the way my body looks, and I have so much more to offer. And, if I put my feminist hat on, it's like, why do I have to look beautiful anyway? Like, that's not the most important thing about me, and it never has been. I'm a smart person. I'm caring. I'm kind. I'm funny. So why does having a thin stomach make any difference anyway? And so that message was so important to me, and it has been such a game changer in my life because it's helped me realize I don't have to be thin to be an important person in the world. I think it goes back to that value. I don't have to live up to other people's expectations and values. I have to just value myself and love myself. That's the most important thing. And I manage to do that most days, and that's all that matters.
That's a great message. I really thank you for sharing that because so many of us struggle with figuring out our worth now that we're not the healthy person we once were, now that we're not thin because, especially women, we're supposed to be thin and beautiful and productive and all the things. So what a great message. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed speaking with you. I've learned about Ahimsa. I am going to read more about that. I really hope you do another 30-day because I know I'd love to join in.
Yeah, awesome.
Because this is a great, great message and a great technique for all of us dealing with chronic illness. So I really want to thank you for coming on the show. Emma Polette, EmmaPolette.com.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
Thank you.